Hey guys, tonight we are going to do something a little different. We're not just going to learn about a piece of history. We're going to try to fall asleep inside of it. Our destination is Industrial Revolution England, a time of immense change. And very, very early mornings. Honestly, given the living conditions, you'd be lucky to survive the first week, let alone wake up on time. But don't worry, it'll be your guide through the foggy, coal-mine-scented darkness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel find other curious minds like yours. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where you're listening from. Let me know your city and the time right now in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you're aware of is the cold. It's a damp, persistent chill that seems to seep right out of the brick walls and through your thin, scratchy blanket. You pull it tighter around your shoulders. The rough will a poor defense against the English night. You're lying on a mattress stuffed with what feels like straw and old rags, and it shares a room with at least 4 other rustling, breathing bodies. This isn't your private, quiet bedroom. This is a whole world crammed into one small space. You can hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of your younger siblings in the corner, and the occasional low groan from your father, whose body is still aching from 12 hours straight at the textile mill. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and something else, the city itself. A permanent scent of coal smoke hangs in the air, so pervasive that you've long since stopped noticing it. It's just the smell of life, the smell of the air you breathe in undoubt, every single day. Your own muscles are singing a dull, throbbing song of exhaustion. Every part of you feels heavy, weighted down by the day's labor. Your fingers are still stiff from handling the machinery, and your back is a landscape of dull aches. Sleep isn't a gentle, welcome friend tonight. It's a desperate necessity. It's the only currency you have to pay for the energy you'll need tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Outside the shingle, grimy window pane, the world of the 1840s isn't silent. The cacophony of the day has died down, but the night has its own unique soundtrack. You can hear the distant, lonely clatter of a horse-drawn cart moving slowly over the cobblestones, its iron short wheels striking sparks in the dark. A dog barks somewhere down the alley, a sharp, sudden sound that quickly fades. Historians still debate just how quiet these industrial cities truly were at night, while they lacked the constant, monotonous hum of modern traffic. They were filled with these sharp, organic, and unpredictable sounds that we've since lost. You shift your weight on the lumpy mattress, trying to find a position that doesn't press a stray piece of straw into your ribs. This is the reality of your rest. It's a stolen moment of peace in a life defined by noise and relentless work. The idea of waking up on your own, refreshed and ready for the day, is a luxury you can't even comprehend. Your body doesn't want to wake up. It wants to sink into this lumpy mattress and stay there for a week. But you can't, because in this world, time isn't just money. It's survival. The factory whistle doesn't care if you're tired. The foreman doesn't care if you slept poorly. To be late is to risk a fine, a beating, or even the loss of your job, which would mean disaster for the entire family sharing this cold, damp room with you. The pressure is immense, a silent weight that sits on your chest even as you try to drift off. For now, though, that pressure begins to fade. The sounds of the city become a muffled lullaby. The cold becomes a familiar presence. Your breathing deepens, joining the soft chorus asleep in the room. You are falling, sinking into a profound, dark, and dreamless slumber, completely oblivious to the fact that your entire livelihood rests on a strange and simple tradition, one that involves a specific person, a very long stick, and your specific window pane, just before the crack of dawn. For now, you just sleep. Your sleep is a black, bottomless well. There are no dreams, no tossing and turning, just a heavy, absolute stillness. This isn't the restful sleep of a lazy Sunday morning. It's the profound shutdown of a body pushed to its absolute limit. The energy you burned yesterday at the mill wasn't just spent. It was overdrafted from an account that was already empty. This period of unconsciousness is you desperately trying to balance the books before the next day's withdrawal. Every second of this oblivion is precious, a tiny grain of gold in the pan of your exhausting life. But even in this deep state, the background anxiety of your world hums just beneath the surface. It's a low-minus frequency dread. The knowledge that this piece is temporary and its end must be precise. For you, waking up isn't a gentle transition into a new day. It's a cliff edge you have to scramble over, and the drop on the other side is terrifyingly steep. Let's imagine the place you have to be the factory. Picture of vast, or a cathedral dedicated not to a god, but to a machine. Inside, hundreds of looms and spinning jennies are packed together, creating a forest of iron and wood. The noise is a physical force, a deafening, continuous roar that shakes the very floorboards and settles deep in your bones. You can't hear the person next to you speak. You learn to read lips, to use sharp, quick hand signals. The air itself is a character in this drama, thick with cotton dust that clings to your throat and lungs. A phenomenon so common they have a name for the persistent cough it creates: brown lung. Historians have long documented the brutal physical toll of this environment, but it's the psychological pressure that truly defines your existence. Presiding over this chaos is the foreman. He isn't just a manager. He is the absolute ruler of this floor. He walks the narrow aisles with a watch chain looped across his waistcoat. The silver timepiece, a symbol of his power. He is the keeper of the clock, the enforcer of a new kind of discipline that your ancestors, who worked the land according to the seasons and the sun, would never have understood. This is time minus discipline, a concept historians see as one of the most fundamental and jarring shifts in human history. It's the idea that your life is no longer measured by tasks: milking the cow, mending the fence, but by the relentless, impartial ticking of a clock. And that clock is a merciless tyrant. The factory gates open at a specific time, say 5:30 a.m., and they are locked at precisely 6 o'clock a.m., not a minute after. To be late is not a minor inconvenience. It is a crime against production. The punishment is swift and certain. Arrive at 6 and you might find the factory gates literally barred shut in your face. You would stand there, breathless from your run, and watch as your chance to earn a day's wage disappears behind cold iron. If you make it inside, but just barely, the consequences are still severe. The foreman will be there, his expression a mixture of contempt and satisfaction. Your name goes into a ledger, and a fine is docked from your already meager pay. A few pence might not sound like much, but for a family living on the edge, it's the difference between a loaf of bread and an empty pantry. For younger workers, the punishment could be more direct: a rap across the knuckles with a ruler, a humiliation designed to instill the fear of the clock deep into your very being. The ultimate fear, the one that haunts your sleep, is getting the sack. Being fired doesn't just mean you have to find a new job. In many of these towns, the factory owner also owns the cramped terraced house you live in. Losing your job means losing your home. You and your entire family could be out on the street within a week, with nowhere to go, and in a town dominated by one or two major mills. Getting fired from one often meant being blacklisted from the others. Your reputation as unreliable would follow you, a brand that marked you for poverty in the dreaded workhouse. This is why your sleep is so important, and so fragile. It's a tightrope walk. You need to be deeply asleep to recover, but you absolutely cannot afford to be too deeply asleep. The entire economic and social structure of your world is balanced on the single, critical moment of waking up. Academics still debate how deeply the working class internalized this new, brutal rhythm of industrial life. Did they accept it as an unavoidable reality, or was there a constant, quiet rebellion in their hearts against the ticking of the foreman's watch? As you lie there in your shared bed, the cold air on your face, none of this is an academic theory. It is the fabric of your reality. Your father's aching back, the cough rattling in your sibling's chest, the gnawing hunger that is never quite satisfied, all of it is tied to that factory, to that clock. Your survival, and your family's, depends entirely on you getting out of this bed and through those gates before they swing shut. And you, in your exhausted state, are completely incapable of ensuring that, on your own, you are utterly dependent on a sound you have not yet heard. The black well of your sleep is so deep that at first, the sound doesn't even register as a sound. It's more like a flaw in the fabric of the darkness, a tiny, rhythmic imperfection. It's a feeling before it's a noise, a faint, distant pulse that seems to be coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. You're miles beneath the surface of consciousness, and this is just a single pebble dropping into the water, its ripples taking a long, long time to reach you. Tap. There it is again, a little clearer this time. A dry, distinct sound. It's not the groan of the building settling, nor the scuttling of a rat in the walls. It doesn't have the metallic ring of the distant train yard, or the organic suddenness of a barking dog. This sound is intentional. It has a purpose. Your sleeping brain, still busy with the monumental task of repairing your exhausted body, tries to ignore it. It files the sound under unimportant and attempts to pull you back under. Tap. Two in a row, close together. They are sharp, concise, and aimed directly at you. The sound isn't happening down the street or in the next building. It's happening right there, at your window. It's a vibration that travels through the cheap, wavy glass of the single pane, across the few feet of cold air, and seems to land directly on your eardrum. Your body doesn't move. Your eyes remain sealed shut. But somewhere deep inside, a switch has been flicked. The process of waking has begun, whether you want it to or not. You are now floating in that strange, disorienting space between sleep and wakefulness. The heaviness is still there, a lead blanket pinning you to the lumpy mattress, but your mind is slowly beginning to churn. It's trying to place a sound. It is a sound of wood, or perhaps bone, striking glass. It's a sound completely alien to the natural world. This is a human sound, a manufactured sound, a signal. For a moment, there is silence. You cling to it, hoping it was a fluke, a dream. You try to sink back into the warmth, what little of it there is beneath your blanket. Please, some part of you begs, just a little longer. But you know, with a certainty that is rising like a slow tide, that it's not over. The silence now feels different. It's not the empty silence of the deep night. It's a pause. It's the space between notes. And then, it returns. Tap. Tap minus step minus step. This time it's different. There's a rhythm to it. A pattern. It's almost like a code. This is one of those subtle details of daily life that history books often miss the specific acoustics of the wake minus up call. A professional in this field wouldn't just bang on a window randomly. That was for amateurs. A real professional had a technique. Some used a light touch. Some a specific rhythm that their clients would recognize. Historians still debate the nuances of this lost trade. Was there a recognized language of taps? A different pattern for a heavy sleeper versus a light one? Or was it more like a signature? A unique rhythm that announced, "That's me, your guy. Time to get up." The specific pattern is meant for you. It's a targeted message in a city full of sleeping people. It's designed to be loud enough to penetrate your sleep, but not so loud that it wakes your landlord on the floor below or the family next door who paid for a wake minus up call half an hour later. It's a precision strike. The sound is an arrow, and your consciousness is the target. Your eyelids flutter. The darkness behind them shifts from pure black to a deep, bruised purple. You're fighting it. Every muscle in your body is screaming in protest. The desire to roll over and pull the blanket over your head is a physical force, an almost overwhelming urge. But the sound has done its job. It has planted a seed of urgency in your mind. The factory, the foreman, the locked gate, the vying. The consequences of ignoring this sound are far worse than the pain of leaving this bed. The tapping stops again. The person on the other side of that glass is waiting. They know you're in there. They know you can hear them. They are patient, but not infinitely so. Their job isn't just to tap. Their job is to get you up. This is a service, and the service isn't complete until the client is awake. Slowly, reluctantly, You peel your eyes open. The room is still shrouded in an inky blackness. Not a sliver of dawn has yet begun to slice through the grime on the window. You see nothing but shadows. You hear nothing but the soft breathing of your family. You know someone is out there. A silent, mysterious figure, standing in the pre-minus dawn cold, holding a tool of their trade, their presence felt only through that strange, insistent percussion. You lie there, heart beginning to beat a little faster, staring at the black rectangle of the window, waiting to see what happens next. The night is no longer yours. It has been pierced. You lie there, frozen, your eyes locked on the dark rectangle of the window. The silence stretches. For a while, hopeful moment, you think maybe he has gone. Maybe he misread the schedule. Or maybe you dreamt the whole thing. But then, a single, sharp tap rings out, louder and more insistent this time. It's a question. Are you up yet? You know you have to respond. This is part of the ritual, the unspoken agreement. Leaving him out there to tap indefinitely would be rude. And more importantly, it would waste his time, which is just as valuable as the factory yes. You have to signal that the message has been received. You fumble for a moment on the small, cluttered bedside table, your fingers closing around a small tin cup. You tap it once against the wall beside your bed. Thunk. It's a dull, low sound, but in the stillness of the room, it's enough. Outside, the tapping ceases immediately. A shadow detaches itself from the other shadows. For the first time, you see a shape against the faint, greyish glow of the distant gaslight at the end of the street. It's a human silhouette, tall and lean, draped in a heavy coat and a cap pulled down low, and in his hand, he holds the source of the noise upon. It's impossibly long and thin, stretching from the cobblestones below all the way up to your second-story window. It looks like a giant fishing rod for catching sleeping people. This figure, this shadow that has pulled you from the depths of your exhaustion, has a name. He is the knocker-upper. He is your personal, professional, human alarm clock. This isn't a friend doing you a favor. This is a paid service. Every week, your family gives him a few precious pence to ensure that this exact ritual takes place. He taps on the pane for 45. I am, without fail, he is, for all intents and purposes, your living, breathing, snooze minus but unminus proof alarm clock, and he is essential to your survival. He doesn't have a clock face or a mechanical bell. His tools are this long stick and an internal clock, honed by years of walking these same streets in the dark. No one is quite sure who the very first knocker-upper was. Historians debate whether the profession grew out of the night watchman, who already patrolled the streets, or if it was an entrepreneurial invention by someone who saw a need and filled it. It seems to have emerged organically in the northern industrial towns of England, a grassroots solution to a top-down problem imposed by the factory masters. There were no official guilds or certifications. You became a knocker-upper simply by being reliable and owning a very long stick. The pole he uses as a piece of simple, practical technology. It's often made of bamboo, which is both long and lightweight, making it easy to carry on a long route and maneuver in the narrow alleys. The end that touches your window isn't just a blunt stick. That would risk breaking the glass, a costly accident for everyone involved. It's often padded with a rag or a piece of leather, or sometimes it's a wire brush that makes a distinct scratching sound. The tool is customized for the job to make a noise that is sharp enough to wake the dead, but soft enough to leave the window intact. You watch as the silhouette lowers the pole. He gives a short, almost imperceptible note, a sign of a job completed before turning away. You don't know his name. Not really. You might know him as the old man from Weaver Street or just the knocker-up. But he knows you. He knows this is the second window on the left, above the tailor shop. He knows your father works at the Arkwright Mill and needs to be woken before the first whistle. He has a route, a mental map of sleeping souls that he navigates through the dark. Each window a different client, a different time, a different life resting on his punctuality. You hear his footsteps on the cobblestones, moving away. They are slow and steady. A moment later, you hear it again. That familiar sound, but fainter now, further down the street. Tap, tap, tap. He's waking the Chandler family, who work at the dye works and get an extra 15 minutes of sleep. His work continues, but yours is just about to begin. The responsibility has been transferred. The knocker minus upper has done his part. The rest is on you. The cold air in the room suddenly feels colder. The lumpy mattress, which moments ago was a haven, now feels like a trap. A wave of exhaustion washes over you. A final, desperate plea from your body to ignore the signal and surrender back to sleep. But the sound of the tapping, and the image of that silhouette with his long pole, has lit a small fire of urgency in your mind. The day has begun, and it began with a tap on your window from a man you barely know, but to whom you owe your livelihood. You swing your legs out of bed, and the shock of the cold floorboards shoots up your spine. It's a jolt that dispels the last, clinging tendrils of sleep. Now that you're ill, your mind starts to focus on the man who woke you, or more specifically, on the tool he used. That long, spindly pole is a surprisingly versatile and ingenious piece of folk technology, and his was the only kind. The world of knocker minus uppers was a world of strange and customized hardware, a perfect example of function dictating form. The most common tool, the one you just experienced, was the long pole, usually crafted from lightweight bamboo or a slender piece of ash wood. It was the standard for reaching first or second minus story windows, but even within this category, there was variation. Some knocker minus uppers would attach a wire brush to the end, which made a scratchy, insistent sound on the glass that was impossible to ignore. Others preferred a softer touch, wrapping the tip in layers of cloth to create a duller, more rhythmic setting. The choice of tip wasn't just personal preference, it was a business decision. Break a client's window, and you'd not only have to pay for it, but you'd also lose your reputation for reliability. But what about the people on the higher floors? The families crammed into the attics of tall, narrow tenement buildings. A bamboo pole, no matter how long, could become unwieldy and difficult to aim at a third or fourth minus story window in the dark. This is where the real ingenuity came in. The solution for these high minus altitude clients was a tool that was both simpler and, frankly, more delightful, the pea-shooter. Imagine your knocker minus upper, instead of a long pole, carrying a length of hollowed minus out wood or metal tubing. His ammunition was a pocket full of dried peas or small, hard clay balls. Standing in the street below, he would take aim and, with a sharp puff of air, launch a tiny projectile at the distant window. Tink, tink, tink. The sound of a hard pea hitting the glass was sharp, distinct, and perfectly targeted. It was a brilliant solution, lightweight, easy to carry, and with an almost infinite range, provided your aim was good. There's a famous photograph of a woman named Mary Smith from Limehouse, London, who was still working as a knocker minus upper in the 1932, pea-shooter in hand. She was a living relic, a master of this nearly forgotten art form. Her accuracy with the pea-shooter the stuff of local legend. The choice of tool often said something about the knocker minus upper and their clientele. A long pole was great for a dense route, with many clients on lower floors. A pea-shooter was for the specialist who handled the more difficult minus-to-minus reach customers. Academics who study the material culture of the working class find these tools fascinating. They are objects born entirely of necessity, with no thought to aesthetics, yet they are perfectly designed for their purpose. They are a form of vernacular technology, a term for the everyday inventions of ordinary people, often undocumented and now mostly lost to time. Then there was the problem of noise pollution, 19th century style. What if you had two families living in the same room, that one needed to wake up at 5 o'clock a.m. and the other at 6 o'clock a.m.? Tapping on the window would wake them both, causing an hour of misery for the second family. The solution: some knocker minus uppers used a long tube, almost like a primitive stethoscope or a speaking trumpet. They would place one end against the client's door, or even the wall near their bed, and whisper or speak softly into the other end. It was a targeted, private wake minus up call, the Victorian equivalent of a vibrating alarm under your pillow. One of the more debated and perhaps apocryphal tools was the snuffer minus out. The story goes that some clients would leave a lit candle in their window as a signal. The knocker minus upper's job was to use a special to lay long pole with a cone minus shaped cup on the end to snuff out the candle flame from the street, signaling that it was time to wake. While it's a wonderful image, historians are still on the fence about how widespread this practice actually was. Was it a real myth, or just a bit of folklore that sounded good? As you pull on your rough, woolen trousers in the dark, you don't think of it in these academic terms. You just know that the man with the pole, or maybe a woman with a pea-shooter, is an indispensable part of your morning. You are one link in a long chain of their route tonight. They're simple, handmade till is the key that unlocks you from your slumber and sets you on the path to the factory floor. It's a piece of wood that stands between your family and starvation. And as you get ready to face the day, you know that this strange, intimate transaction, mediated by a stick and a pane of glass, is already being repeated all over the city, in 100 different ways, with 100 different tools, now dressed in the semi-minus darkness. The sounds of your own movements, the scuff of your boots on the floor, the rustle of your clothes seem loud in the sleeping room. You move with a practiced quietness, trying not to wake the others. As you do, you can't help but picture the man who woke you, continuing his journey through the city. His night is far from over. You were just one stop on a long and winding route, a human-powered delivery service for wake arsenals. His journey didn't begin at your window. It began hours earlier, in his own cold room, where he had to wake himself, perhaps with one of the first, unreliable, and expensive spring-loaded alarms, or maybe just through sheer force of habit. He would rise while the city was still in its deepest slumber, when the only people on the streets were the night watchman and the stray cats. He'd pull on his thickest coat, grab his pole or pea-shooter, and step out into a world that belonged entirely to him and a few others like him. The city you know, by dire bustling, crowded, noisy place is transformed. At this hour, it's a labyrinth of shadows and silence. The main thoroughfares are empty, vast canyons of brick and stone, but his route doesn't stick to the main roads. It takes him into the heart of the city's maze, the narrow alleys, the hidden courts, the cobble lanes that are barely wide enough for a cart to pass through. These are the places where the workers live, packed into tenement buildings that blot out the sky. He navigates this world by a different kind of map. It's not a map of streets, but of people. His map is a list, either written down in a tattered notebook or, more likely, committed to a formidable memory. The list would look something like this: Weaver Street, no Lingdanse, second floor left, for 45 I am the Cotter family. Then, no Lingdanse, attic, for 50 I am old man Himmler. Turn onto roleplay. No Lingdan back room, 5 o'clock. I am the Miller girls. Each entry is a life, a job, a deadline. This mental map is a remarkable feat of memory and organization. He knows who the heavy sleepers are, the ones who need a few extra, vigorous steps. He knows which windows are fragile, which dogs are likely to bark, and which cobblestones are loose and will trip him up in the dark. He knows the geography of his community on a level of detail that has been completely lost to us today. We navigate by street names and numbers on a glowing screen. He navigated by the lives of the people he served. The only light comes from the gas lamps, which cast pools of lonely, flickering orange light at long intervals. In between these pools of light, the darkness is absolute. These shadows are his workplace. He moves through them with a steady, unhurried pace. He can trust. His route is too long, and he needs to conserve his energy. Plus, running would draw unwanted attention. His is a profession that thrives on being almost invisible, a ghostly presence whose only evidence is a series of taps on glass. Some historians have romanticized this figure, painting him as a lonely, almost poetic wanderer of the night, but the reality was likely far more mundane and grueling. Imagine walking those uneven cobblestones for hours in the rain or, worse, a freezing winter slate. The wind would whip down the narrow alleys, chilling him to the bone. This wasn't a romantic stroll. It was a physically demanding job, often undertaken by people who were too old or not physically strong enough for factory work themselves. It was a way to earn a few shillings when other options were closed. There's an ongoing debate about how solitary this job truly was. Did knocker-uppers work in teams? Did they have territories? While most evidence points to it being a largely individual enterprise, it's plausible that in larger, densely populated areas, a family might work a route together, or that informal agreements existed between different knocker-uppers to avoid poaching clients. This side of the canal is mine, that side is yours. We lack the detailed records to know for sure. As you quietly open your door and slip out into the cold hallway, you can trace his path in your mind. From your window, he moved down the street, his steps receding into the distance. Now he's likely 2 or 3 streets away, perhaps aiming his pea-shooter at an attic window or having a whispered, 1-sided conversation through a door. He is a phantom thread, stitching together the waking moments of an entire community. You, the Chandler family, the Miller girls, you are all beads on the same string. And he is the one pulling you all towards the gaping maw of the factory gate. His journey through the dark is what allows your journey in the dawn to happen. Without his lonely map of sleeping souls, the industrial machine would grind to a halt. You stand in the narrow, dark hallway of the tenement, the door clicking softly shut behind you. The air here is even colder than in your room, thick with the lingering smell of boiled cabbage and damp plaster. As you begin to make your way towards the stairs, your thoughts linger on the figure of the knocker-upper, now several streets away. Who was that person? Really, you see him as a function, a silhouette with a stick, but behind that silhouette was a life, a story, and a motivation just as pressing as your own. The popular image of the knocker-upper is often that of an elderly man, a retired factory worker or an old soldier, someone with a steady hand and a reliable nature who was no longer fit for the back-breaking labor of the mills. And this was certainly true for many. It was a perfect job for those in their later years. It required punctuality and trustworthiness, not brute strength. The pay, though modest, was a vital supplement to a meager pension or parish relief. These men were often well-known figures in the community, respected for their diligence. They were living landmarks, as much a part of the neighborhood's character as the local pub or the church spire. However, limiting the role to old men would be missing a huge part of the story. A surprising number of knocker-uppers were women, in a society where employment opportunities for women were severely restricted, mostly to domestic service, textile factories, or back-breaking agricultural work. Being a knocker-upper offered a rare degree of independence. A woman could manage her own clients, set her own route, and control her own earnings. We know about women like the aforementioned Mary Smith with her pea-shooter, who became a minor celebrity in her own right, but she was just one of many. These women would have been tough, practical, and utterly reliable, carving out a niche for themselves in the pre-dawn economy of the industrial city. But here's a colder, more surprising fact sometimes. The knocker-upper was simply another worker on their way to the factory. Imagine a man who also had to be at the mill by 6 o'clock. He might make a deal with a dozen or so of his neighbors who lived along his route. He'd wake up extra early, and for a penny or two a week from each of them, he would tap on their windows as he made his own way to work. It was an early form of the gig economy or a side hustle. It was a clever way to monetize your own commute, turning a daily necessity into a small but significant source of extra income. This model was especially efficient, as the knocker-upper had the exact same deadline as his clients. And then there's the oddest arrangement of all, one that historians still find both logical and slightly bizarre. In some towns, the local police constables would double as knocker-uppers. On the surface, it makes a certain amount of sense. They were already being paid to be out on the streets all night, walking a beat and ensuring order. Why not earn a little extra by providing a wake-up service? A constable walking his route could easily tap on a few dozen windows for his clients, However, this practice raises some interesting questions that are still debated. Did it create a conflict of interest? Were you less likely to get a fine from a constable who was also on your payroll? Or did it actually improve community relations, turning the constable from a figure of authority into a helpful, paid service provider? The lines between civic duty and private enterprise became wonderfully blurry. So the person who woke you this morning could have been a grandfatherly figure, a determined widow, a fellow factory worker trying to make ends meet, or even the local bobby on his beat. What united them all was not their age or gender, but a shared set of characteristics. They were trustworthy, they were punctual, and they were willing to trade their own sleep for a few coins. They were the unsung, low-tech backbone of the industrial workforce. As you reach the top of the creaking staircase and begin your descent, you realize the knocker-upper isn't just some abstract service. He or she is a person embedded in your same world. They breathe the same coal-dusted air, walk the same grimy streets, and feel the same gnawing pressure of poverty. They are not an outsider, but a neighbor. Their job is a reflection of the community's absolute dependence on the factory clock, a shared struggle against time that bound them all together. The taps on your window were not just a service rendered, they were a signal from one struggling soul to another, a message passed through the darkness that said, simply, it's time, we have to go. You reach the bottom of the staircase, your hand brushing against the cold, damp wood. The ground floor of the building is even darker and colder, a tunnel leading to the outside world. The service you received this morning, the crucial series of taps, washed free. And as you prepare to step outside, your mind briefly turns to the other side of this transaction, the payment. The arrangement is simple, built on a foundation of cash and trust. It isn't a bill that arrives in the post or a deduction from your wages. It's a personal, face-to-face exchange. Once a week, usually on a Sunday afternoon, the one sliver of time that resembles a day of rest, the knocker-upper comes to collect his fee. It's a strange reversal of your daily interaction. You see the man who wakes you, but in the daylight. He's no longer a mysterious shadow wielding a pole in the darkness. He's just a man, perhaps older than you imagined, with tired eyes and a coat that's seen better days. He doesn't carry his long pole or his pea-shooter on his collection rounds. That would be improper. He comes to your door, cup in hand, and waits. Your mother is usually the one who pays him. She untees a corner of a cloth where she keeps the family's coins and carefully counts out the fee. It's typically 2 or 3 pence for the week. To us, that sounds like almost nothing. But in your world, it's a significant sum. 3 pence could buy a large loaf of bread, several pints of cheap ale, or a decent amount of potatoes. It's a real, tangible cost that has to be factored into the family's razor-thin budget. It's a sacrifice, but it's a calculated one. The math is simple and brutal. The 3 pence fee is an insurance policy against a fine of 6 pence for being late. Or worse, the loss of an entire week's wages, shillings upon shillings if you get the sack. You are, in essence, paying a tiny fraction of your income to protect the rest of it. It's the most important bill you pay all week. Historians and economists still debate the subtle mechanics of this pricing. Was there a standard rate across a city, or did it vary by neighborhood? Did a knocker-upper charge more for a client who was a notoriously heavy sleeper and required 5 minutes of persistent tapping? Did a 4th-fluoretic window, requiring the skill of a master pea-shooter, command a premium price compared to an easily accessible ground-4 window? We lack the detailed ledgers to know for sure, but it's likely that prices were set by a complex mix of tradition, competition, and the knocker-uppers own assessment of the job's difficulty. The transaction at the doorway is brief. Your mother places the coins in his hand. He nods his thanks, perhaps mutters a God bless, and confirms the time for the week ahead. Same time, then, Mrs. 4点45 午饭, and with a confirmation, the contract is renewed for another 7 days. Here's a small, human detail that official records don't capture: the element of trust. What if, one week, your family had a particularly bad run? Your father was sick and lost a day's pay, and the money simply wasn't there. You couldn't just cancel your subscription. This is where the community fabric came into play. Ekirch was the faceless corporation. He was your neighbor. More often than not, he would understand. He might make a note in his book and agree to let you pay him back the following week. This flexibility was crucial. His business relied on long-term relationships, not on squeezing every last penny out of a family in distress. Of course, this trust could be broken. Fail to pay for too many weeks, and you might find the pre-dawn tapping at your window simply stops, leaving you to the mercy of your own exhausted body. This simple payment model, this exchange of a few coins for punctuality, highlights the profound difference between your world and ours. Your alarm service is a person. You have a relationship with him. His reliability is tied to his reputation in the community, not to a corporate brand. He is held accountable not by online reviews, but by the very real threat of losing his clients to a rival down the street if he fails to perform. You pull open the heavy front door, and a wave of cold, damp air hits you in the face. The thought of the Sunday payment ritual vanishes, replaced by the immediate and pressing reality of the walk ahead. The service has been rendered. The fee is accounted for. Now, you must hold up your end of the bargain. You step out onto the cobblestones, joining a growing stream of dark figures, all moving in the same direction, all pulled from their sleep by the same network of taps, scratches, and peas against the glass. The stream of people you've joined is growing thicker, a river of dark coats and hunched shoulders flowing through the narrow veins of the city. The collective sound is a shuffling, clattering march of tired bodies. You walk with your head down, conserving warmth, your mind fixed on the long day ahead. But a chilling thought snakes its way into your consciousness. What if it hadn't worked? What if you had been so deep in the well of your exhaustion that the tapping on the window was just another pebble, its ripples never reaching the surface? You imagine yourself still in bed, curled under the thin blanket, lost to the world. The room is silent. The city is waking up outside, but you are oblivious. It's a terrifying thought, not because of the extra sleep, but because of the consequences that would follow when you finally woke up on your own. Hours later, to the horrifying realization that the factory day was half-minus done without you. But here's the thing you don't fully appreciate: a good Ekirch didn't just give up. His professional reputation, the very foundation of his business, rested on one single promise you'll get. A client who overslept was a mark of failure, a stain on his record that cost him not just your business, but the business of others who heard about his unreliability. He had a vested interest in your consciousness. So, what happened if you didn't give that answering thunk against the wall? What if no light appeared in the window? The Ekirch, standing in the cold street below, would not simply shrug and move on. It would begin escalation. Phase 1 was simple, more of the same, but with greater intensity. The gentle, rhythmic tapping would be replaced by a loud, insistent, almost angry rapping. R.A.P. or A.P. R.A.P. minus or A.P. minus or A.P. The sound would be sharper, the pauses shorter. He might switch from the padded end of his pole to a harder, wooden tip. If he used a pea-shooter, he might send a volley of 3 or 4 peas at the glass in quick succession. The message was changing from a polite "good morning," time to wake, to a firm "I know you're in there. Do not ignore me." If that still produced no response, he would move to phase 2, changing the stimulus. The human brain is remarkably good at filtering out persistent, monotonous sounds during sleep. A constant tapping, even a loud one, can eventually become part of the dreamscape. A skilled Ekirch knew this, perhaps not from a scientific perspective, but from experience. He had to introduce a new sound, something novel and jarring that the sleeping brain couldn't easily ignore. He might switch from tapping to a long, slow scrawl or ape of his wire brush attachment across the pane. It was a dreadful, nerve-minus jangling sound, like giant insect legs on glass. It was a sound designed to make your teeth itch, even in your sleep. The final phase was the riskiest, the last resort that professionals tried to avoid. If all else failed, he would have to use his own voice. He cup his hands around his mouth and call up towards the window, keeping his voice as low as he could, while still ensuring it would penetrate the glass. Oi, Cutter, time to be up. This was a delicate operation. Shouting too loudly would wake the neighbors, or worse, the landlord, who might come storming out to complain about the disturbance. It was considered unprofessional, a sign that the knocker-upper had lost control of the situation. Historians still debate the etiquette and the limits of this persistence. Were there unwritten rules about how many times you could tap before resorting to a scrape? Was shouting seen as a legitimate to love the trade, or a mark of an amateur? The evidence is mostly anecdotal, passed down in family stories rather than written in any professional manual. It was a folk art, with its own secrets and unwritten codes of conduct. One of the more peculiar, unless substantiated, claims is that some knocker-uppers carried a pouch of sand or fine gravel to toss at a window, creating a diffuse, pattering sound that was less likely to disturb the whole house. You've never experienced this escalation, thankfully. The first few taps have always been enough to stir you, but as you walk, the realization dawns that the system you rely on has a built-minus in redundancy. The knocker-upper's stubbornness is your safety net. He is not just paid to tap. He is paid to succeed. His persistence is the invisible shield protecting you from the disaster of oversleeping. You look up from the cobblestones and see the silhouette of the factory against the slowly lightening sky. It looms over the city like a great, dark beast, smoke already beginning to curl from its tall chimneys. The thought of not waking up is a cold knot in your stomach, but it's mixed with a strange, newfound respect for the shadowy figure with the long pole. He wasn't just knocking, he was fighting a small battle on your behalf, a battle against your own exhaustion, and it was a battle he was determined to win. The sky is now a bruised, pre-minus dawn purple, and the silhouettes of the factory chimneys are sharp against it. The air is still cold, but it carries a new energy, the hum of a city stirring to life. Your own mind, now fully awake, is a strange mix of dread for the day ahead and a quiet contemplation brought on by the wall. You think about sleep, not just your sleep, but sleep itself. The way the knocker-upper had to fight to pull you out of it makes it feel like a single, precious, monolithic thing. A block of unconsciousness you have to steal from the world each night. But it wasn't always like this. You have a vague, distant memory of your grandmother, who grew up in a small village before her family was forced to move to the city. She used to talk about sleep in a way that sounded strange to you. She never spoke of a good night's sleep. She spoke of her first sleep and her second sleep. To her, and 2 generations of people before her, the night wasn't a solid block of 8 hours of oblivion. It was divided into 2 distinct halves. People would go to bed not long after the sun went down, say around 9 p.m. They would sleep for 3 or 4 hours, and then, around midnight or 1 a.m., they would wake up, naturally, without a knocker-upper. This wasn't insomnia. This was the norm. This waking period, often called the watch, would last for an hour or 2, and then they would go back to bed for their second sleep, which would last until dawn. This concept, what historians now call segmented sleep or biphasic sleep, was once the dominant way humans rested for thousands of years. It's mentioned in countless historical documents, from personal diaries to medical texts, so casually that it's clear the writers assumed everyone slept this way. The time between the 2 sleeps wasn't seen as an annoyance. It was useful, productive, and even cherished time. What did they do in this quiet, solitary hour? The answers are a glimpse into a lost world. For the devout, it was a time for prayer and quiet reflection, a moment of profound peace and connection with God. For those who could read and afford candles, it was a time to study or write letters. Benjamin Franklin, a man obsessed with productivity, was a famous practitioner of this method. But for ordinary people, it was a time for other things. You could do small, quiet chores around the house. You could sit by the dying embers of the fire and simply think. It was a time for intimacy between spouses. Many medical texts from the era advised that this was the best time for conception. And here's a detail that feels almost alien to your isolated, modern existence. Sometimes people would visit their neighbors. The night was not the fortress it is today. A person might wake from their first sleep, see a light in a neighbor's window, and wander over for a quiet chat. The world was darker and more dangerous in some ways, but in others, it was more communal and less rigidly structured. This entire rhythm of life has been stolen from you. The factory whistle and the foreman's watch have murdered the second sleep. There is no time for a peaceful, waking intermission in your night. Your sleep has been compressed, hammered into a single, desperate block. The idea of waking up at 1 a.m. for a watch is a luxury you cannot afford. If you woke then, you would just lie in the dark, riddled with anxiety about being too tired for the 6 a.m. start. Historians are still locked in a fascinating debate about the death of segmented sleep. Did the advent of better, cheaper artificial lighting in the cities play the primary role, extending the day and encouraging people to go to bed later? Or was it the brutal, unyielding schedule of industrial capitalism that was the true killer? The evidence seems to point squarely at the factory. The references in letters and literature to first sleep begin to vanish with startling speed right at the turn of the 19th century, precisely when the Industrial Revolution was hitting its stride. The knocker minus upper, in this context, is more than just a human alarm clock. He is the enforcer of this new, unnatural way of sleeping. His tap minus tapping is the sound of the industrial age asserting its dominance over the natural rhythms of your body. He is there to ensure that you conform to the new minor minus phasic sleep pattern demanded by the machines. You feel a strange pang of loss for a way of life you have never known. The idea of 2 sleeps, with a quiet island of time in between them, sounds like a forgotten paradise. It sounds more human, more gentle. As you finally reach the looming shadow of the factory gate, you realize that the exhaustion you feel isn't just from the work. It's from being forced to live and sleep in a way your body was never designed for. The world of your grandmother is gone, and the knocker minus upper stick is the tombstone marking its grave. The crowd around the factory gate is thick and tense now. A sea of flat caps and worn shawls. The air smells of damp wool and anxious sweat. You stand among them, a silent atom in a larger organism, all waiting for the moment of entry. From across street, another river of workers merges with yours, and you notice a subtle difference. They seem just as tired, but perhaps a little less frayed. You wonder, does their street have a different knocker minus upper? A better one? The thought opens up a new line of inquiry in your pre-minus work days. Your knocker minus upper, the man with the pole, isn't the only one in the city. It can't be. This district alone holds thousands of workers. Far too many for one person to wake. That must mean he has rivals. Somewhere out there in the dawn, other figures with long poles and pea-shooters were working their own routes, sometimes just a street or 2 away from yours. This wasn't a formal, regulated industry. There was no knocker minus upper guild that assigned territories or set prices. It was a free market in its rawest form, driven by reputation, word minus of minus mouth, and the subtle, unspoken rules of the street. Competition must have been a constant, quiet pressure. How would that competition even work? It wouldn't be like the shops in the town center, with signs in the windows, advertising their wares. A knocker minus upper's business was built on something far more ephemeral: trust. His entire value was in his reliability. If he failed, if a client overslept and got fined or fired, word would spread like wildfire through the type minus knit community. Don't hire old Thomas. The women would whisper over the washing line. The Miller family lost a day's wage on his walk. Go with the woman from Row Plain. She's never missed a morning. So the primary battlefield was reliability. But surely, price played a role. Imagine a new knocker minus upper trying to break into the business. He might start by walking a street that already has an established service. His only real tactic would be to undercut his rival. He could knock on doors on a Sunday afternoon and offer the same service, not for 3 pence, but 4 tuppence minus halfpenny, for a family like yours. Saving half a penny a week was a powerful incentive. It could mean an extra potato in the pot, but it was a gamble. Was the saving worth the risk of hiring an unknown quantity over the proven? if more expensive, incumbent. This leads to one of the most fascinating questions for historians of this lost profession, and one they still actively debate. Was this competition gentlemanly or cut minus throat? Was there a sense of professional courtesy, an unwritten code that you didn't solicit clients on another knocker minus upper's established patch? Or was it a brutal, dog minus eat minus dog world where rivals would do anything to gain an advantage? The evidence is scarce, hidden in the unrecorded conversations of the past, but it's easy to imagine a quiet and declared war being waged in the pre-10 hours. A knocker minus upper could engage in subtle sabotage. He might accidentally make a bit too much noise when passing a rival's client's house, hoping to annoy the sleeper and make their own knocker minus upper seem clumsy. Or he could start a whispering campaign, spreading rumors that his competitor was becoming forgetful or fond of a drink. Here's a truly weird niche thought. Could you poach a client by demonstrating superior technology? Perhaps your knocker minus upper uses a standard pole with a soft drag. A rival comes along who has acquired a new wire brush attachment that makes a much more effective noise. He might offer a free demonstration, convincing your family that his method is more modern and reliable. It was a low minus tech arms race, fought with bamboo, pears, and wire. You look around at the faces in the crowd, some tense, some resigned. You realize that your family's choice of knocker minus upper was a serious economic decision. It was an investment in punctuality. You feel a quiet sense of loyalty to your guy, the steady, rhythmic tapper who has never let you down. You hope your mother never gets tempted by a cut minus rate offer from some upstart on the next street over. Your job literally depends on her consumer savvy. A loud, groaning creak cuts through the murmuring crowd. All heads snap forward. The great wooden factory gates are beginning to swing inward, pushed open by a watchman. The time for contemplation is over. The river of people begins to move, squeezing through the opening into the noisy, dust minus filled belly of the beast. For the next 12 hours, the rivalries of the knocker minus uppers, the nuances of their trade, and the history of sleep will all fade away, replaced by the deafening, all minus consuming roar of the machine. You are swallowed by the factory. The moment you step through the gates, the world outside ceases to exist. The noise hits you first, a physical wall of sound made from hundreds of clattering, pounding, whirring machines. It's a mechanical monster with 1,000 moving parts, and you're just one small, soft component fed into its gears. You find your station, a spinning jenny that you will tend for the next 12 hours, and your body falls into the familiar, mind minus numbing rhythm of the work. Hours pass. The sun, which you briefly glimpsed as a pale disk in the sky, is now high above the soot minus stained factory roof. But you wouldn't know it. There are no large windows here. Light is an expense, and wall space is for machinery. The only illumination comes from the gas lights hissing overhead, casting a yellow, sickly glow on the dust minus filled air. Your focus narrows to the threads, the bobbins, the relentless motion of the machine in front of you. But in a brief moment of mechanical quiet, as a nearby machine is stopped to fix a jam, a thought of the knocker minus upper returns, framed in a new light. This morning, you saw him as a service provider, a rival, a piece of living history. But now, you consider another role he plays, one that has nothing to do with waking you up. The knocker minus upper wasn't just a man with a root. He was a constant presence in the community during its most vulnerable hours. While the rest of the city slept, he was out walking the streets. He saw things. He knew the rhythms of the neighborhood not just as a list of clients, but as a living, breathing entity. He was, in many ways, an unofficial night watchman, a guardian of the community's slumber. Imagine him on his rounds. He turns a corner onto a silent street and sees a flicker of orange where there shouldn't be one, the beginning of a fire in the back of a bakery. He would be the first to notice, the first to raise the alarm, banging on doors not to wake people for work, but to save them from the flames. His presence was a built minus in, no minus deck fire alarm for the entire district. Or perhaps he spots something else, a figure trying to jimmy open the lock on the butcher's shop. A professional thief would know to avoid the main streets patrolled by the constables. but they might not account for the quiet, unpredictable path of the knocker-upper. He wasn't law enforcement, and he certainly wasn't looking for a confrontation. That a quick, loud series of taps on a nearby window, seemingly awake -up call could be enough to spook the intruder and send them scurrying back into the shadows. This social function is one of the most interesting and least documented aspects of the profession. Academics can find court records and newspaper clippings that hint at this role, but much of it remains in the realm of historical deduction. Did the community consciously see that knocker-upper as a form of protection? Probably not explicitly. It was a secondary benefit, a positive externality of his primary job. You paid him to wake you up. The added security was a free bonus. There's a subtle but important distinction here. The official police constable represented the power of the state. He was an outsider, an authority figure who could arrest you or your father for public drunkenness or brawling. The knocker-upper, on the other hand, was one of you. He was part of the community's fabric. You trusted him in a way you would never trust a constable. If you were in some kind of trouble in the middle of the night, you'd be far more likely to call out for his help than for the official law. This created a strange duality in his role. By day, when he collected his fees, he was a humble tradesman. By night, he was a silent sentinel. He knew who was sick because he saw the doctor leaving their house at 3 a.m. He knew of family arguments that spilled out into the street in the dead of night. He knew who was sneaking home late and who was sneaking out early. He was the keeper of the neighborhood's secrets, the quiet observer of its hidden life. Historians debate how much this role was formalized. It's unlikely there was any official community watch element to his job, and yet, his very existence changed the nature of the streets at night. His steady, reliable presence made the darkness feel a little less absolute, a little less dangerous. He was a human landmark in the temporal landscape of the night, and his presence provided a strange, unspoken sense of order. A sudden, sharp clang brings you back to the present. The machine next to you has been fixed, and it roars back to life, snatching the moment of quiet contemplation away from you. The noise returns to its full, overwhelming force, but the thought lingers. The man who woke you this morning wasn't just doing a job. He was performing a kind of civic duty, whether he knew it or not. He was the quiet guardian of your street, a thread of humanity woven through the darkest hours, ensuring that the world you slept in was just a little bit safer, a little more watched minus over. The day grinds on, a blur of repetitive motion and deafening noise. Your hands move automatically, tying broken threads, replacing full bobbins. Your mind in void. You don't measure the day in hours. You measure it in ache. The ache in your lower back that sets in around mid-morning. The stiffness in your fingers that arrives after lunch. The throbbing in your feet that screams for release by late afternoon. This is the physical language of your labor. But then, a new sound begins to cut through the regular din of the factory. It's a sound that is both familiar and dreaded. It starts as a low hiss, a building pressure that you can feel in your chest. It's the sound of the great boiler, the iron heart of the factory, gathering its strength for one final, mighty exhalation. All work is supposed to continue at the same pace, but you can feel a subtle shift in the energy on the floor, a new tension, an anticipation, and then it comes. A sound that obliterates all others. W-H-O-O-O-O-O. O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O. The factory whistle. It's not a whistle like a bird or a train. It's a roar of pure, superheated steam. A physical force that vibrates through the floor, through your bones, through your teeth. It's the voice of the factory itself, and it has one single message: the day is done. This is the sound that serves as the bookend to your day. Your morning began with the small, personal, targeted sound of the knocker-upper stick, a sound meant for your ears only. Your day now ends with this colossal, impersonal, all-encompassing blast of steam, a sound meant for the entire city. It's the alpha and the omega of your working life, the whisper and the scream. The machines begin to wind down. The forest of iron and wood slowly falls silent, and the sudden quiet is almost as shocking as the noise was. In the ringing silence, You can hear 100 other sounds, men coughing, the shuffling of feet, the low murmur of tired voices. You and your fellow workers begin a slow, zombie-like shuffle towards the gates. You don't run. You don't have the energy to run. You are a spent force, an empty vessel. The whistle serves as the ultimate deadline, but it also has a more complex role, one that historians of labor often discuss. It was a tool of immense psychological power. The factory owner didn't have to tell each worker when to start or stop. He had this whistle. It was the ultimate symbol of his control over the lives of thousands. It regulated the rhythm of the entire town. People ate, slept, and lived their lives according to its shrieks. Wives at home knew when to start cooking the evening meal by the sound of the afternoon whistle. It was a form of mass communication, the first of its kind, that synchronized the lives of an entire population to the needs of industry. But here's a peculiar, less-minus known fact: the whistle wasn't just for the start and end of the day. Many factories used a series of whistles for different purposes. There might be a shorter blast for the lunch break. There might be a specific sequence of blasts to signal a fire or a major accident, a sound that would send a chill through the entire community as everyone wondered if it was their husband, their son, their daughter who was hurt. This language of the whistle is another lost dialect of the industrial age, a code that every person in the town understood implicitly. The debate still rages among social historians: was the whistle seen purely as a tool of oppression, or did workers eventually co-adopt it as their own? In some ways, it was a shared signal of liberation. That evening blast, as deafening and jarring as it was, meant freedom. It meant you had survived another day. It meant you could go home. On the rare occasion of a strike, silencing the whistle became a powerful symbol of the workers' collective power. You push your way out of the factory gates, back into the city. The sun is low in the sky, casting long shadows. The air outside, even with its familiar scent of coal smoke, feels fresh and clean compared to the dust-choked atmosphere of the mill. You are no longer an individual, but part of a great, weary tide of humanity flowing back into the warren of streets from which you emerged this morning. You walk with the same hunched shoulders, but your purpose is different. You are not walking towards work, you are walking away from it. The journey home feels twice as long, your legs heavy as lead. You think back to the knocker miner supper, the starting gun of your day. His job was to get you here, to this exact point of exhaustion. He delivered you to the factory, and now the whistle is releasing you, sending you back into the night, where you will eat, sleep, and wait for the whole cycle to begin again with another tap on your window. The knocker miner supper and the factory whistle are the two poles of your existence, the human and the mechanical, working in perfect, brutal harmony to keep the great machine fed. Your journey home is a slow, shuffling retreat from the battlefield. The streets that were dark and empty this morning are now teeming with life, but it's a drained, weary kind of life. You eventually turn onto your own street, and the familiar sight of your tenement building is a small comfort. As you approach, you see a woman a few doors down, sweeping her front step. She's humming a tune, her movements brisk and energetic. She is not a factory worker. She is a local curiosity, a small business owner, a living legend. She is a knocker miner supper. She is someone like Mary Smith, the famous pea-shooter from London, or perhaps her local equivalent. Seeing her in the daylight, engaged in a normal domestic chore, is almost jarring. You're used to thinking of the knocker miner supper as a nocturnal creature, a shadow, but here she is, a solid, real person, and her story, and the stories of women like her, represents a fascinating and often overlooked chapter in the history of this profession. In an era when a woman's place was overwhelmingly in the home, becoming a knocker miner supper was a radical act of economic independence. For a widow with children to feed, or a single woman with no family to support her, it was a lifeline. It was a job that didn't require the approval of a male foreman or factory owner. Your clients were your neighbors. Your business was built on your own reputation for diligence and trustworthiness. This woman on your street, let's call her Mrs. Higgins, probably inherited the business from her husband. A common story. He might have been an upper minus upper who grew too old or fell ill, and she simply took up his pole and his root to keep the family income alive. But she wouldn't have kept the business for long if she wasn't good at it. Her clients, your neighbors, would be unsentimental. They needed to get to the factory on time. Her gender was irrelevant. Her punctuality was everything. Her to-love choice might have been the pea-shooter, a device famously associated with female knocker-uppers. Why the pea-shooter? Historians have a few theories, and the debate is surprisingly lively. One practical theory is that a pea-shooter and a bag of peas were much lighter and less cumbersome to carry on a long route than a heavy 15-foot pole. Another, more sociological theory is that it was seen as a more feminine to less aggressive and brutish than a big stick banging on a window. It required precision and a good eye, not strength. It was a subtle, clever solution. Imagine Mrs. Higgins on her rounds. She would have faced challenges her male counterparts did not. A woman alone on the streets in the dead of night was in a much more vulnerable position. She would have needed to be not just reliable, but also tough and street-smart. She would have known which alleys to avoid, how to handle a drunken heckler, and how to project an aura of confidence and purpose that warned anyone against bothering her. She was just a service provider. She was a survivor. Her existence also challenges our assumptions about the strict gender roles of the Victorian era. While the dominant ideology, especially in the middle classes, preached the doctrine of separate spheres, men in the public world of work, women in the private world of the home, the reality for the working class was far messier. Economic necessity bulldozed ideology. If a woman could earn money for her family by shooting peas at windows, then that's what she did. It was a perfect example of how working-class women negotiated and reshaped the boundaries placed upon them. Was she seen as an oddity? Perhaps, at first, but her daily reliability would have quickly turned her into a respected institution. She wouldn't just be Mrs. Higgins, she'd be our Mrs. Higgins. She'd be woven into the fabric of the community's life. The mothers of the neighborhood would trust her. She would have been a confidant, a keeper of secrets, privy to the daily struggles of the family as she woke up. Her role would have blurred the lines between a commercial service and a form of communal care. You give her a slight nod as you pass. She nods back, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knows you. She knows what time you need to be up, what factory you work at, which window is yours. In that brief moment of acknowledgement, there's a strange sense of solidarity. She is part of the same system that grinds you down, but she, like you, has found a way to navigate it, to survive within it. Her small business, her pea-shooter, and her formidable reputation are her tools of resistance against the poverty that threatened to swallow everyone in this neighborhood. She is not just a woman sweeping a step. She is a testament to resilience, a quiet hero of the pre-stone world. You finally reach your own front door, push it open, and stumble. Inside, the single room that serves as your family's kitchen, living space, and your parents' bedroom smells of boiled potatoes and stale air. Your mother looks up from the hearth, her expression a familiar mix of relief and worry. You collapse onto a wooden stool, the day's exhaustion hitting you like a physical blow. You've made it. You survived. But tomorrow is not a work day. Tomorrow is Sunday, a precious, rare, glorious day of rest. A day with no factory whistle, no foreman, no machine. A day you can actually sleep in. The thought is a balm to your aching soul. You can already feel the bliss of not having to wake up in the dark, of letting your body rest until the sun is actually in the sky. A thought then surfaces, a tiny splinter of irritation in the relief. Your next-door neighbors, the Baxters, are not so lucky. Mr. Baxter works for the railway, and his shift starts at the ungodly hour of 4 o'clock on a Sunday, which means that their knocker-up are a different one from yours. A man known for his heavy hand will be at their window long before dawn, and their window is separated from your head by about 2 feet and a single layer of crumbling brick and plaster. This is the hidden, dark side of the knocker-upper system, the collateral damage. The noise that saves one person's livelihood can be the thief of another person's precious rest. On a weekday, it doesn't matter. Everyone is getting up anyway. But on a Sunday, it's a form of auditory torture. You know exactly how it will play out. You'll be deep in the most profound, healing sleep of your week. And then, it will start. WHAP. 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 Baxter's knocker minus upper doesn't believe in gentle persuasion. He uses a thick wooden pole, and he raps it against the window frame with the force of a man trying to break down a door. The sound will jolt you awake with a surge of adrenaline and fury. Your one chance to sleep in, shattered by a service you don't even pay for. This everyday annoyance is a slice of life that the grand narratives of history tend to miss. We talk about labor movements and industrial output, but we forget the intimate, grinding frustrations of daily existence. How many neighborly disputes were started by an overzealous knocker minus upper? How much resentment festered in the thin minus walled tenement buildings because of these second minus hand awakenings? Historians who study urban life call this the problem of acoustic leakage. In the densely packed, poorly constructed housing of the industrial city, privacy was a myth, and silence was a luxury. Your life was an open book and an open ear. You knew when the baby next door was crying, when the couple upstairs was arguing, and precisely when your neighbor was being woken for his Sunday shift. There's a debate among sociologists about how people in the past coped with this. Did they simply accept it as a fact of life, an unavoidable consequence of their living conditions? Or did it create a constant, low-minus level stress that contributed to the general misery of urban poverty? There are no easy answers. We can find anecdotal evidence in diaries and court records of complaints about noise, but we can't measure the quiet anger of a man like your father, who, after 60 hours of back-breaking work, just wants one morning of peace, only to be woken by the thumping on his neighbor's glass. You might try to stuff your ears with rags, or pull your thin pillow over your head, but it's useless. The sound and the vibration will cut right through, and the worst part is, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't complain to the knocker minus upper. He's just doing his job. You can't complain to the Baxters. They need to earn a living. The culprit is the system itself, the thinness of the walls, the proximity of the windows, the relentless demands of a 24/7 industrial economy that never truly sleeps, even on the Sabbath. As you eat your meager supper of bread and broth, the joy of the coming Sunday is already slightly tarnished. You know that your rest will be broken. It's a small injustice, a minor irritation in a life full of major hardships, but it's a reminder that in this crowded, noisy world, your time, your peace, even your sleep, is never truly your own. It is always at the mercy of the needs and actions of the people crammed in all around you, and the relentless economic forces that dictate when a pole must strike a pane of glass. Sunday morning arrives, just as you fear. The WHAP, WHAP, WHAP from next door rips you from a deep sleep. Your father groans. You lie there in the dark, fuming, until the noise stops and the Baxters shuffle out of their room. It takes another hour to fall back into a restless, unsatisfying sleep. The day of rest has been stained before it even began. Later that afternoon, during your family's weekly walk, the one chance to get some air that isn't thick with cotton dust, you see something new and intriguing in a shop window. It's not the butchers or the bakers, it's the pawnbrokers, a place of last resort for many, but also a purveyor of second-hand goods and curiosities. And sitting on a dusty velvet cloth amongst tarnished silver lockets and old tools, is a strange little object, a small, brass-cased clock, with two little bells on top and a tiny hammer poised between them. It's an alarm clock. This isn't the first alarm clock ever invented. Grand, expensive alarm clocks had existed for centuries, owned by wealthy merchants and aristocrats. But this is different. This one is small. It's made of brass, not silver, and while it's still far too expensive for your family to even consider buying, its very presence in a pawnbroker's window means they are becoming more common, filtering down into the second-hand economy. It is a sign of a coming revolution, A quiet ticking that heralds the end of an era for the knocker minus upper. The mass production of affordable, reliable alarm clocks, which really took off in the latter half of the 19th century thanks to German and then American manufacturers, was the single greatest threat to the profession. Why pay a man 3 pence a week, every week, when you could, for a 1 minus time payment of a few shillings, own a machine that could do the job for you? At first, the threat wasn't obvious. These early clocks were notoriously unreliable. They might run too fast or too slow. The alarm might go off an hour early, or not at all. A famous bit of folklore from the era tells of families who would buy an alarm clock and then continue to pay their knocker minus supper for a few weeks, just to be sure the machine could be trusted. They would, in essence, pay the knocker minus supper to wake them up in case their alarm clock failed. The human was the backup for the machine, but technology improves. The mechanisms became more robust, the timekeeping more accurate, the price steadily cheaper. As factories began to churn them out by the tens of thousands, they became an attainable object, a symbol of modernity and self-reliance. To own an alarm clock was to take control of your own schedule. You were no longer dependent on another person's memory or punctuality. Your waking was now a private contract between you and the machine. This shift represents a major point of debate for social historians. Did the alarm clock liberate the worker from the communal, sometimes intrusive, system of the knocker minus upper, or did it further isolate them, replacing a human relationship, however transactional, with the cold, impersonal tyranny of a bell? On the one hand, the alarm clock offered privacy and precision. It solved the collateral damage problem that ruined your Sunday morning. The Baxters could have their own personal alarm, and you could have your peace. It eliminated the weekly fee, freeing up precious pennies in the family budget. It was, in many ways, a more efficient and logical system. On the other hand, something was lost. The knocker minus upper, for all his flaws, was a person. He could be flexible. If you were sick, you could tell him not to come. An alarm clock has no empathy. It will ring at the appointed hour whether you are healthy or dying. The knocker minus upper was part of the community's social fabric, the unofficial night watchman. The alarm clock was just a piece of metal and gears. It saw no fires, noticed no intruders. It only knew how to do one thing: make a noise at a predetermined time. As you stand there, staring at little brass object in the window, you feel a strange mix of emotions. You feel the allure of its independence, the promise of a Sunday morning undisturbed, but you also feel a faint, undefinable sense of sadness. The clock represents progress, efficiency, the future, but that future feels a little colder, a little more automatized. The world of the knocker minus upper, with its long poles, its pea-shooters, its unwritten rules and human connections, suddenly seems fragile, ancient, and doomed. The steady, reliable tap of the pole on glass is about to be drowned out by the shrill, mechanical ringing of 1,000 tiny bells. Weeks turn into months. The rhythm of your life remains unchanged: the pre-dawn walk, the 12-hour shift, the exhausted shuffle home. The little brass alarm clock remains a distant dream. But the idea of it, the possibility, has taken root. The quiet ticking of progress is getting louder. One evening, your father comes home with a look of grim excitement. A fellow worker at the mill, a man known for his forward-minded, thinking ways, has bought one, an alarm clock, a brand new one, imported from America. Suddenly, the abstract threat to your knocker minus upper has a name and a face. The entire tenement is buzzing with the news. It's a subject of intense debate and speculation. Will it work? Is it worth the money? Is it a betrayal of old man, your neighborhood's faithful knocker minus upper for the past 20 years? The factory floor becomes a laboratory for this great social experiment. For the first week, the man with the clock is a subject of ridicule. His cook's alarm is jarring unloud, and he complains he wakes up with a nervous start. He sets it 10 minutes too early out of fear, losing precious sleep. Old man Hemlock continues to tap on his window, just in case, and the man pays them both. a subject of much amusement to his fellow workers. The long pole is winning. But by the third week, the story changes. The man has learned the clock's temperament. He sets it for the exact time he needs. It rings, he wakes, and it works, every single day. He politely tells Old Man Hemlock that his services are no longer required. The news ripples through the community. A beachhead has been established. The machine is no longer a novelty. It's a viable alternative. Now your family faces a choice, a dilemma that thousands of others across the industrial world were facing at the same time. Do you stick with the old way, the human way, or do you embrace the new, the mechanical? It's a classic battle of tradition versus modernity, played out not in a parliament or a university, but at your own kitchen table. On one side of the argument is loyalty and trust. Old Man Hemlock has never failed you. He is part of your life, a familiar, reliable presence. There's a human connection there, however thin. He needs the money. Abandoning him for a machine feels cold, ruthless. It feels like you're breaking a social contract. What would the neighbors think? This argument is rooted in community, in shared history, in the devil you know. On the other side is the cold, hard logic of economics and convenience. An alarm clock costs, say, 5 shillings. Old Man Hemlock costs 3 pence a week. A quick calculation shows that the clock would pay for itself in just 20 weeks. After that, your wake minus up service would be effectively free for the rest of its mechanical life. That's 3 pence a week, every week, forever. That could go towards food, or rent, or a new pair of shoes. Furthermore, the clock would solve the Sunday morning problem. It offers privacy, control, and personalization. This argument is rooted in individualism, in efficiency, in the promise of a better, more streamlined life. This exact debate is something historians of technology love to analyze. It's a perfect case study of technological adoption. The decision isn't purely rational. It's wrapped up in emotion, social pressure, and risk assessment. Is the proven reliability of the old system worth more than the potential savings of the new one? How much do you value the human touch? How much do you fear the soulless machine? For weeks, the debate rages in your home. Your mother is cautious, siding with loyalty in the proven system. Your father, a practical man who sees the long minus term savings, is tempted by the machine. You are torn. You hate being woken up on Sundays, but you feel a strange sense of allegiance to the shadowy figure with the pole. HES been a constant in your life for as long as you can remember. The tipping point comes, as it so often does, from a place of crisis. One week, Old Man Hemlock falls ill. For 2 straight days, he doesn't make his rounds. A wave of panic hits the neighborhood. People oversleep. Fines are levied at the factory. One man loses his job. The human system, for all its charm, has revealed its critical flaw. It is mortal. It can get sick. It can fail. The incident shatters the illusion of perfect reliability. The machine, which previously seemed cold and impersonal, now appears steady and impartial. It doesn't get the flu. It doesn't have bad days. Its loyalty is absolute, because it has no loyalty at all. The argument is over. The following Sunday, your father takes a significant portion of the week's wages and goes to the shop. He comes home with a small, heavy box. Inside is a brass clock, the hammer poised between its 2 bells. The long toll has lost the jewel. The first morning with the alarm clock is a jarring experience. You've placed it on a small crate by the bed, and its ticking fills the room with a new, metallic heartbeat. It's a relentless, anxious cell, completely different from the organic silence it has replaced. You lie in a state of suspense, waiting. At the appointed time, there is no gentle, rhythmic tap. Instead, a furious, metallic brrrr rips through the air. A mechanical shriek so violent it makes you sit bolt upright, your heart hammering against your ribs. It's efficient, yes, but it feels like being woken up by a fire, not a person. After the noise is silenced, you find yourself listening, not for the clock, but for the silence outside. You listen for the footsteps of old man Hemlock on the cobblestones, and the familiar sound of his pole tapping on the Baxter's window next door. But the Baxters have also bought a clock. His footsteps still pass, a faint, rhythmic shuffle in the darkness, but his route is shorter now. He no longer stops on your stretch of the street. There is a hole in the acoustic fabric of the morning, a missing note in the city as song. It feels both like a victory and a loss. Your family is just one of many. Over the next few years, the change sweeps through the neighborhood. The sound of tapping, once the universal music of the pre-minus dawn hours, becomes a rarity. The profession of the knocker-minus-upper enters a long, slow, terminal decline. It doesn't die overnight. It fades away, street by street, client by client, like a photograph bleaching in the sun. But the profession was surprisingly resilient. While in the big cities the alarm clock won a swift victory, the knocker-minus-upper survived for decades longer in the smaller, more isolated industrial towns of northern England. The last of them were still walking their routes well into the 20th century. Photographs exist of knocker-minus-uppers at work in the 1942 and 52. There are even anecdotal, though hard to verify, claims of the very last professional knocker-minus-upper retiring as late as the early 1970s. These were the ultimate holdouts, serving aging clients who never trusted the new technology, or living in communities so traditional that the old ways simply refused to die. Here's one of the strange, ironic twists in the story just as the profession was beginning its slow fade. Some companies tried to formalize it, instead of workers paying a local man or woman directly. Some large mills and railway companies hired their own official knocker-minus-uppers. These were company employees, paid a wage to ensure the rest of the workforce got to their shifts on time. The knocker-minus-upper, once the very definition of a freelance entrepreneur, was now on the corporate payroll. He was given a uniform, a designated route, and a list of employees to wait. It was a last-minus-ditch effort to guarantee punctuality, professionalizing the service right on the edge of its extinction. But for the most part, the final knocker-minus-uppers were independent figures, walking relics of a bygone age. And this is where historians debate the final chapter of their story. How were these last few practitioners viewed by the communities they served? Were they cherished and protected, seen as symbols of a simpler, more human time? Or were they regarded as stubborn anachronisms, slightly embarrassing figures clinging to an obsolete trade in a world of electricity and progress? The answer is likely both. Figures like Mary Smith, the London pea-shooter, became minor celebrities, photographed by newspapers and celebrated as quaint links to the past. They were nostalgia embodied. But for the younger generation, growing up with the sound of an alarm clock by their bed, the sight of an old man with a long pole might have seemed strange, even primitive. He was a ghost from their parents' world, a reminder of a poverty and dependence they were trying to escape. Years pass. You are older now, your own children sleeping in their own. The tenement is still standing, but the world outside has changed. The streets are lit by the steady, white glare of electric lamps, not the flickering glow of gas. One morning, on your way to the factory a shorter day now, thanks to the unions you see him. It's not old man Hemlock, who passed away years ago. It's another man, impossibly old, his back bent into a permanent question mark. H.E.S. carrying a long, scarred bamboo pole. He is walking slowly, methodically, down a side street, and you realize with a jolt that he is one of the last, a living fossil. You stop and watch until he turns a corner and disappears. The sight doesn't just trigger a memory of a sound, it triggers a memory of a whole world that has vanished. A world where waking was a shared, communal act. A world connected by a network of trust and a few pence a week. Your alarm clock is reliable. It is efficient. It is private. But as you stand there in the silence left by the old man's passing, you realize that the price of that efficiency was a certain kind of human connection, a thread that, once broken, could never be rewoven. You continue on your way to the factory, but the image of the old man with his pole is burned into your mind. the silence he walked into. The silence he left behind, it seemed more profound than the absence of sound. It's the silence of a finished chapter, a book closed forever. You live now in the age of the alarm clock, an age of efficiency and personal responsibility. But as you walk through the familiar streets, you can't help but feel that the world has lost its specific kind of quiet and replaced it with a different, more isolating kind of noise. The morning soundscape of your childhood was not silent, but it was structured. It was a symphony conducted by the knocker minus uppers. It began with a single, distant tap, followed by another, building into a scattered, rhythmic percussion that swept through the sleeping city. It was a shared experience, even if the tap wasn't at your window. Hearing it down the street was a reminder that you were all in this together. It was the sound of a community stirring, a network of human fallibility and trust, all gearing up for the same collective struggle. What is the sound of the morning now? It's a cacophony. From one window comes the shrill ringing of a brass clock. From another, the deeper clang of a steel one. Each alarm is an island of noise, private and uncoordinated. It's 100 different shrieks, all firing off at slightly different times, with no shared rhythm, no human intention. The new sound of the morning is not the sound of a community waking up. It's the sound of a million tiny, isolated machines, each screaming into a private void. This is the very heart of what was lost, the replacement of a public ritual with a private utility. The knocker minus uppers service was a web that connected households. Your punctuality was linked to his reliability, which was in turn linked to your neighbor's payment and your other neighbor's heavy sleeping. You are all nodes in a human network. The alarm clocks severed those threads. It made your punctuality entirely your own concern. It was liberating, yes, but it was also isolating. It was one more small step away from depending on the community, and one step closer to depending only on yourself and the machine. And with the knocker minus supper went his other, unofficial roles. The passive security he provided is gone. The streets in the dead of night are now the sole territory of the constables and those with ill intent. There is no longer a quiet, trusted figure moving through the alleys, noticing the things no one else sees. The community lost its nocturnal eyes and ears. It lost that subtle layer of protection, not through a great catastrophe, but through the slow, creeping adoption of a more convenient technology. This is where historians still argue. Was this sense of loss real, or is it just a romantic nostalgia that we, looking back, project onto the past? Many argue that for the average worker, the alarm clock was an unambiguous good. It was cheaper. It was more reliable than a man who could fall ill or get drunk. It offered privacy and control. They would argue that a working minus class family struggling to survive had no time for sentimental notions of community fabric. They wanted what worked, what saved them money, and what gave them one less thing to worry about. To them, the silence left by the knocker minus upper wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was the sound of not being bothered on your one day of rest. But other historians argue that this view misses the subtle, uncontrovertible value of human connection. They believe that even if people couldn't articulate it, the shift from a human minus-centric system to a machine minus-centric one had a real psychological impact. It contributed to a growing sense of anonymity and individualism that characterized modern urban life. The knocker minus upper was one of the last vestiges of a pre-minus industrial, village minus-like mentality surviving in the heart of the industrial city. His disappearance was not just the end of a job. It was the severing of a route that connected the new world to the old. As you arrive at the factory, a place that now feels slightly less monstrous, with its regulated hours and marginally better conditions, you feel the pull of both sides of that argument. You wouldn't go back. You wouldn't trade the privacy and control of your alarm clock for the worry of depending on a fallible old man. You appreciate the extra pennies in your pocket and the quiet of a Sunday morning. And yet, the sight of that last knocker minus upper has stirred something in you. It has reminded you that progress is never a simple transaction. It always involves a trade. You traded a human connection for mechanical efficiency. You traded a shared ritual for private convenience. You traded the unpredictable, rhythmic tapping in the dark for a guaranteed, soulless ringing. And in doing so, you gained a piece of the modern world, but lost a piece of a world that was, perhaps, a little more human. The silence he left behind is the sound of that trade. It's the sound of something forgotten. Time moves on. The factory, once the center of your universe, is now just a brick shell. Its great chimneys cold and silent. You are old now, and your own sleep is lighter, more fragmented. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, you wake for no reason at all, and you lie there in the darkness. In those moments, you feel a strange kinship with your grandmother, the one who spoke of a first and second sleep. Perhaps the body remembers a rhythm that the world has forced it to forget. The brass alarm clock that your father bought with such deliberations is on your mantelpiece now. A silent, polished antique. It was long ago replaced by a small, plastic electric clock with a low, constant hum. That, in turn, was replaced by a digital clock with glowing reed numbers that burned in the dark like a watchful eye. Each one was a step further away from the world of old man Hemlock and his pole. Each one was more precise, more private. No, machine. And now, look at the table beside your own bed. There, glowing softly in the dim light, is the newest knocker minus upper. It's a sleek rectangle of glass and metal, your smartphone. This device is the final, ultimate evolution of the tool that woke you all those years ago. It's a direct descendant of both the knocker minus upper's Poland, the factory owner's whistle. Think about it, like the knocker minus upper. It is a personal service. You tell it exactly when you want to be woken. You can even customize the sound it makes, not a startling, violent bell, but a gentle chime, a simulated bird song, or a favorite piece of music. This is a curious, modern quirk. We use technology to create sounds that imitate a natural, gentle awakening, a direct admission that the raw, mechanical alarms were a form of violence we no longer wish to tolerate. But this new knocker minus upper does something that old man Hemlock and his pole could never have dreamed of. His job began when he tapped on your window, and it ended when you signaled you were awake. His purpose was singular. This glowing rectangle on your bedside table, however, has a purpose that is limitless. It doesn't just wake you up. It's the last thing you see before you try to sleep, and it's the first thing you touch when you awaken. Before your feet even touch the floor, you are checking work emails, reading the day's bad news, scrolling through the curated lives of others. The foreman's watch, which once hung on his waistcoat, now lives inside your phone, a constant, silent pressure. The factory gate, which once locked at 6 a.m., has been replaced by a global 24-hour workday that follows you right into your bedroom. The time-minus discipline that the Industrial Revolution forced upon your body is now something you willingly, even eagerly, enforce upon yourself. Historians and sociologists are in a fierce, ongoing debate about this very phenomenon. Have we used this new technology to reclaim our time? Or have we used it to enslave ourselves more completely than any 19th-century factory owner ever could? The knocker minus upper was an external force. You could, in theory, close the curtains and hope HED go away. But how do you escape a force that you have invited into your own bed? A force that knows your schedule, your contexts, your fears, your desires? The long pole simply tapped on a window pane, a barrier between the outside world and your private slumber. The smartphone taps directly on your consciousness. Its light disrupts your body's ability to produce melatonin, confusing the ancient, biological clock within you. Its endless stream of information keeps your mind churning long after your body is desperate for rest. The industrial age compressed sleep into one solid block. The digital age seems determined to dissolve its edges entirely, blurring the sacred line between waking and sleeping, work and rest, public and private. The man with the long pole was a professional who woke people up. It was his trade. Today, we are all our own knocker minus uppers. We set our own alarms. We discipline our own schedules. We manage our own punctuality. But we have also become the factory owners, the foremen, the relentless drivers of our own productivity. The entire system of industrial time, with all its pressures and anxieties, has been miniaturized, digitized, and placed in the palm of your hand, that gentle, simulated birdsong that wakes you in the morning. It's just a velvet glove on the same iron fist that built the factories and silenced the second sleep. The new knocker minus upper is the most efficient one yet, because you can never, ever escape it. The world around you begins to soften now. The sharp edges of the factory, the cold of the floorboards, the shrill ring of the alarm, they all begin to melt away, dissolving into the warm, quiet stillness of your own room. The story is over, but the echoes remain, fading into a gentle hum. You are floating now, in that peaceful, weightless space that comes just before sleep truly takes hold. Your own bed is a safe harbor, far from the noise and the struggle. The journey is dull. Your breathing is slow and deep, a soft, steady rhythm in the quiet of the night. You are drifting on a calm, dark river, leaving the shore of wakefulness far behind. The anxieties of the day, the plans for tomorrow, they are all distant thoughts now, small and unimportant. There is only the feeling of comfort, of release, of letting go. You are sinking gently into the deep, soft mattress of your own dreams, a place where time has no power, where no whistles shriek and no alarms can ring. Rest now, just rest.